So
All
let
right.
me grab the link so we can send it out. Oh, I have to update this too. On the fly production, baby. Quality. Review. All right. So I'm gonna drop the link in the chat. No, I can't hear you, Damian. I just saw your message. I don't know why it says boxing there, but let me take that out. Hold up. Julio, would you mind posting it on the Facebook page?
Yes, sir.
I got to get on that. I've been slacking. I've been telling Derek every week too. I'm like, I'm gonna get on it, and then just haven't had the fucking time. But I got to get into it. Post it on Twitter.
Where do you send it?
To the Facebook group, the OTS group. Right now, I'm just posted on my Twitter.
No, I'm saying, where did you send the link at?
In the private chat, do you see it on the bottom? Oh, you on mobile, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I found it though.
Let me check my phone because I feel like he is texting me and I'm not even looking at it. All right. I think he's back in now. There he goes. How's it going, Damian?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That was weird. I don't know why the sound wasn't coming through.
No, you're all good, man. Don't worry about it. I was efforting through some things too. I'm just finishing up the banners. I just figured I'd go live now so we could all tweet it out. And then I'm going to rip the show once it's done and drop the edited version too. So just to give you a heads up on the plans there, the link for the YouTube is in the chat. And then let me just finish posting this on Twitter. And once I'm done with the tags, we could get into it. Sorry for not being ready.
No,
I'm rusty. It's been like 2 weeks since I recorded a show, so y'all gonna have to carry me through this one.
It's all good, man.
All right.
Hey, Julio, do you have a Twitter?
I don't know.
Okay.
All right. All right. I just got to like three more of these tags, and then we're good to go.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you type mad aggressive, yo.
Bro, I'm struggling right now because I don't know if y'all see this, but my laptop screen is destroyed. Like I keep looking at my TV because I can't even tell where things are to click sometimes. Like it's, bro, the worst thing in the world. Don't ever buy a MacBook, guys. I'm literally so annoyed. I just bought this and it got wrecked. I don't even know how. I just turned it on one day and the screen is
Wow.
all glitchy. And it's not even like it's cracked either because each time it glitches differently. So it's like
Wow.
what the hell is going on here? And then they try to tell me I got to pay 450 to get it fixed. Like
Wow.
I basically paid that for the laptop in the first place. Like it's
Yeah,
crazy.
Wow.
that's
So
crazy.
yeah, I'm here
I've
breaking
been
my
having the
neck.
same PC laptop now since like 2011. I'm due for a replacement, but
Oh, you're goaded.
I'm not ready to move on.
Make it last that long, bro. I just got this too. I feel like I've just bought this shit and then I'm having these issues. But yeah, I don't know. I think I might go desktop for my next computer because I am done. I'm done getting boned with this.
No, I feel you on that. Maybe my next one too. 'Cause, yeah, I feel like I don't really, as far as the laptop, I just need the laptop when I go to games and stuff. So I could just use my wife's. The desktop might be the next thing.
All right. All right. Last one. All right. Y'all ready for me to do the intro? Let's get it.
Yes, sir.
All right. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? You are on the sidelines with the Sideline guys. And today, people, thank you for joining us for this very special boxing edition of the show. I'm joined this week by two esteemed members of the OTS family at this point. Shout out to these two guys. I always love having them on the show. And when I was thinking about how I could do the year end review for boxing, just couldn't wait to get the minds together. So, with no further ado, let me introduce you to my guys. I got Julio joining us, and of course, Damian Adams. I just want to go around. Please let the people know where they can find you.
You go ahead, Julio.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you for having me on the show. Pleasure to be here as always. You can find me on Instagram and on Threads at droll_shorts, DROLL_shorts, and on Facebook as Julio Maldonado.
Yes, sir. And what about you, Damian?
So you can find me on all social media platforms at the Real Deal WDA. That's the Real Deal W as in whiskey, D as in Delta, A as in Alpha on all social media platforms. And for my Phoenix sports fans out there, check me out at burncitysports.com.
Yes, sir. Really looking forward to getting right into this episode. But make sure that you're following the brand at OTS Media Co. on all social media platforms, OTS Media on YouTube. And you can also check me out at Negrong MMA on Twitter and TikTok. And of course, Chris Negrong _ on Instagram. So, with all the pleasantries out of the way, folks, we get into why we're actually here this week. Really excited to get into all a range of topics on 2023 and this year of boxing, a year that I can argue with anyone is one of the best years in boxing history. And that's a very weighted thing to say, right? But I feel like a lot of things have really built up and really culminated throughout this year. So, once again, just really excited to get right into it. I think it's only right that we sort of start with the state of boxing and how we feel about basically, once again, a historic year. So, I just want to start out by asking you guys, what do you think sort of caused this shift in boxing that we witnessed in 2023, where we're getting all these big matchups with champs fighting champs and really getting to figure out who the best fighter in each division is? I'll start with you, Julio, but how do you think we got here, man?
To be honest, I think for me or even most of us who are really hardcore boxing fans, it's not too much of a surprise what we saw this year. It's actually kind of been building up to this. I want to say as far back as 2019, 2020, we were starting to really get a lot of those big championship fights. It just wasn't really with big name fighters. But it was setting up perfectly for those fighters to become big name fighters and become big money, big fights. So I think it's something that's been building up for quite some time now, and I'm not really surprised at it. And I think it's really just the beginning, to be honest. I think we have much more bigger fights coming up ahead of us in these next few years.
For sure. And I feel like a big part of it for me when I was looking at sort of where the momentum started, I feel like women's boxing doesn't get enough credit as far as laying the foundation of we need to figure out who the actual champion is in this weight class, right? We got to see a lot of unifications in a lot of different weight classes. Some we didn't really ask for, right? I'm looking at you, Canelo. But others, we got to see some really definitive matchups that we were waiting for years to see. And I think the momentum really started in the women's division to sort of really calling out those big name champions and getting those fights as soon as you can versus sort of building up to this fight throughout many years, which we got some of those too, right? So it was the perfect kind of mix of the fresh idea of champ versus champ, as well as fights that we've been building towards, like Spence Crawford for years. So just a huge year all around. What about you, Damian? How do you think we ended up with this huge 2023?
I think it's a combination of what both you guys have said. Definitely was building more stars from 2018, 2019 till now. Also, you have to give credit to Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. I think the fact that they got together and had both sides of the street come together and make those big fights that they had kind of led to this. And then in 2022, to your point, Chris, the women in 2022 had all the big matchups. You had Alicia Baumgartner versus Michaela Mayer. You had Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. You had Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano all in 2022. And I think that really put the guys on notice, like, yo, we have to make some big time matchups because the women are making the matchups that the boxing fans want to see. So it's a combination of what both you guys said that led to this big 2023.
My screen, but I couldn't agree more. Just the momentum is going the right way, and I really hope we continue to see the trend in 2024 and beyond. Something that I really wanted to ask you guys, there's a big seismic shift as far as the landscape of boxing this year, and that is Showtime leaving the boxing space, right? This has been a fixture of boxing history, let alone just considering the broadcast, right? But just what it meant to be a Showtime fighter versus a regular fighter. It was a big thing. So can't really imagine. I couldn't really imagine this happening a couple years ago. I still don't really understand it, if I'm being honest, because success was always what I thought Showtime had in the space. So I think obviously we have some big new players that are very wealthy. I'm looking at you, Saudi, and what they were able to do with Day of Reckoning, and of course those big events that they threw this year. I think that's going to continue that trend in combat sports in general, including MMA, but especially in boxing. and I'm all for it, right? It's great as a fan to witness. There are some other considerations, right, ethically that go into that too, as far as wanting to support these things. But hey, I'm here to watch the fights, and ultimately, I can't really remember a time, right, where we lose a big name partner, but the culture has shifted so much that it doesn't really feel like it's going to be such a hit to the future of boxing. I say all this to say, how do you guys feel about Showtime's departure and the future of boxing? I'll start with you, Damian.
This one feels a bit different than when HBO stopped showing boxing. When HBO stopped showing boxing, at that point it was like, oh man, really? HBO is no longer going to be in boxing. That felt like kind of like a shot, like almost like, oh wow, this almost on the deathbed of like, wow, boxing is really kind of hurting if HBO is no longer in boxing. And I thought I would feel the same way about Showtime leaving, but like you said, with the emergence of other platforms at the same time as Showtime is leaving, it makes you feel better about the state of boxing because you're like, okay, there's other platforms coming into this like Amazon that might get PBC. So you're like, okay, we are in a good place where we have all these platforms right now with the Zone, with ESPN, with Amazon that are going to be showing fights and going to be competing to show the best fights to get the boxing fans and the casual fans to watch their platform. So I think it's going to put boxing in a great position to continue that momentum from 2023 of getting the biggest fights because those platforms are going to be fighting for eyes to be on their fights.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Damien. Especially with what you said about when HBO left, it definitely felt like, whoa, are we coming to the end of boxing's prime? But this time, although it is kind of saddening to see Showtime go, it's just so much history on that network. At times, I did feel like with Showtime, it was part of the reason why we weren't getting some of the fights we wanted to see. Because every fight we had on Showtime was a pay-per-view fight of only Showtime fighters. It was very difficult to get fights from fighters outside of Showtime to come on Showtime and make a fight. With Showtime no longer being in the game, I think now it opens up with, like Damien said, Amazon, the idea of fights on streaming networks, fights that aren't going to be pay-per-view, which are going to help the state of boxing, I think, because it'll attract more people to watch the sport that may not have watched it before because they didn't want to pay for it, which will lead to even bigger pay-per-views down the line. So I see it being a beneficial thing overall for the sport.
Such a good point. And I love that you brought the idea too of like the competition aspect of it. I feel like that's the biggest part that's missing in MMA, where as a fan you could ask, man, how could you even like still have things to complain about with the way the UFC is set up? And it's like, yeah, I get it. We get some kick-ass fucking fights every single year. But when you consider the fact that they're really a one pony race and they're competing against themselves, there's a lot of things that get stale, right? They don't feel the need to innovate and change the way their product looks. When you have these different networks fighting for the views, it really does change the way they approach things, not only from a quality of fight aspect, but also the production and things like that. I really hope someone lands Mauro Ranallo. He is one of my favorite commentators to watch in general, man. The dude is just a gem and always on point and has something thoughtful and something that really makes you think about for the rest of the day. So shout out to Mauro. I hope he lands on his feet somewhere. I'm sure he will. But with all that being said, I'm really excited to get into the awards section of the show. We got some awards to give out. I don't got the PO boxes to send them to, but we've got these awards. We're ready to give them out. So we're going to start with our 2023 Fighter of the Year for the male side of things. So I'm really excited. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this ticker up, but I can't see my screen because it's all broken. Did that come up? There we go. Wrong one. Male Fighter of the Year. So I am going to start off giving my honor first. This one, you could have went a lot of different ways. I will encourage you guys to think of sort of a honorary mention, because I have a couple for this one that I'll get to later once we go and give out our award. But I'm going to be starting things off by giving mine to the monster from Kanagawa, Japan, Naoya Inoue. What he was able to accomplish in the span of 1 year has been so impressive. Obviously, becoming the second fighter in the history of boxing, the other one being Terrence Crawford, to become undisputed in 2 different weight classes. But what makes it really special for me was his ability to do it literally in the span of 1 year. He spent a lot of time at bantamweight originally, so I honestly could have saw that kind of title run once he got up to super bantamweight, sort of fighting other matchups along the way before getting to the title. But no, he went straight to it, got those belts all racked up, and in big fights, right? Fights where people were underestimating his opponents, especially because of how good he is, right? I thought Tapales definitely surprised some people a couple days ago as far as what he was able to bring to the table in that matchup, and ultimately still, in a way, was able to figure him out and get the finish there late. So I just think what he's been able to accomplish this year is so special. Stephen Fulton doesn't get enough credit, god damn it, as far as what he's done in his career and what that win means in the grand scheme of things. So although Terrence Crawford is going to be mad at me, I think it's only right that Naoya Inoue gets the award. So that's my 2023 Fighter of the Year. Julio, I'm throwing to you. Get the awards out, baby.
Listen, to be honest, like you said, there's some front runners, but I think the conversation is really between only 3 fighters. Inoue being one, Crawford being the other, and of course, my guy. I'm a big Devin Haney fan. He's the third. It's really between them 3. I don't think anybody really comes close to what they accomplished this year. The reason I can't give it to Crawford, and I'm going to agree with you there, is because he only fought one time. Granted, he is the only one who beat a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter this year and completely dominated. So he has a very strong argument. I wouldn't be surprised if he officially wins the award because of that. But to me, you can't be fighter of the year and you only fought once that year. So I'm sorry, Crawford. And I'm also a Spence fan. I'm not happy about how he did my guy. And then leaving bias aside, I think really that leaves it down between Haney and Inoue. I think what Haney did was also super impressive. I got to give my guy credit.
Did we lose him?
Yeah, I think we lost him. We could give him a second.
A very close fight. It was Am I back?
Sorry, you cut out there from a little bit. So you were just getting into the differences between the two. So sorry about that.
Oh, yeah. So I got to give a lot of credit to Haney, beating a pound-for-pound fighter, a Hall of Famer in Loma. There's a lot of controversy behind that. But again, this is a top fighter. We got a chess match, which most hardcore boxing fans expected. That's exactly what it was, and he got the win. Then he went to a new weight class, beat, in my opinion, big man in that weight class. As a Haney fan, it was a fight I was nervous about. But he completely surprised me in dominating the way he did. But honestly, I'm going to have to agree with Chris on this one. I have to give the slight edge to Inoue. Just becoming 2-time undisputed within the span of a year is incredible. I think the only thing that might really deter him from officially winning the award and might have Haney win it is the fact that Stephen Fulton is probably the best name he beat to date, especially this year. And even Stephen Fulton wasn't on the pound-for-pound list. But I think us hardcore boxing fans know, regardless of that it was impressive what he did nonetheless. So I have to agree with you, Chris. I think that's my fighter of the year as well.
So I got to make it unanimous. I have to go with Inoue as well as my fighter of the year. But I do agree that the 3 big nominees are Inoue, Crawford, and Haney. Just to throw a 4th guy in there, Bam Rodriguez had a hell of a year. You think about what he was able to do in the flyweight division, of being able to become unified, and his just demolishment of Sonny Edwards was very, very impressive. So I just want to throw him in there as an honorable mention. But I got to go with Inoue as well. Beating Stephen Fulton, beating Tapales in the way that he did is just unmatched. Crawford definitely deserves a lot of consideration, but I agree. Just one fight. It's tough to get somebody fight of the year just on one fight, even though that was a hell of a fight, and we might have his name come up later as we talk about performance of the year. But that was a hell of a performance. But you got to go with the guy that had two major performances in Inoue.
I love it, and I love that all of you guys didn't give my honorable mention either. Bivol, god damn it, went out there and took that win against Canelo, and then obviously defending his belt again. The second fight is the one that makes you look sideways a little, but either way, man. Once again, speaks to the year in boxing that we get these many candidates that we could seriously consider. But really glad to see Inoue getting the credit he deserves too, because I knew even early on, right. Before the second Donaire fight, I was like, man, this guy is different. And to see him really break out this year has been really something special. So really excited once again for the future. Next up, we got to go to 2023 Women's Fighter of the Year. I'm not going to go first on this one. I was thinking, which way can I do this? I'm going to make Julio go first. So let us know who your Women's Fighter of the Year is.
I'm a huge fan of this person, so there is a little bias, but I think it's a pretty easy choice either way, and I have to give it to Amanda Serrano. She was one of the most active women's fighters this year, so that alone really holds a lot of weight. But she had 3 fights, 3 very dominant wins, and became the first woman to have a 3-round, 3-minute fight per 3-minute. It puts her up for me as Women's Fighter of the Year.
That's tough. I'm sorry you're cutting in and out again, but I think he said that Amanda Serrano was his pick.
Did I break up again?
Because she fought 3 times.
Did I break up again?
Yeah, you went in and out.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah.
Sorry about that.
It's all good. No worries.
But yeah, just to back up his point, Amanda Serrano, 3 fights this year, first fight ever. Me and you have talked about this, Chris. Why haven't the women been fighting 3-minute rounds? And Amanda Serrano went out there and did something about it and had a 12-round, 3-minute fight, which you just have to love. And to speak to her dominance, 3 fights. On the judges' scorecard, she lost a total of 4 rounds in those 3 fights over the year. Like, that's just incredible to see that amount of dominance from a fighter fighting against top competition as well. This isn't like she's fighting against bums. She's fighting against top competition and dominating this way. She's no longer knocking people out like she was a few years back, but has now set herself up to be the fighter of the year going forward because of the pace that she's fighting at and the dominance in which she's putting together these performances.
I love that you guys both went this route because I went a different route, and this was the one I wanted to pick, if I'm being honest. Where my heart lies, of course, I'm a Puerto Rican boxing fan, so anyone that will listen to me talk about Amanda Serrano has heard me explain her greatness, and I think she also had a very underrated year as far as being active. But unfortunately, I feel like the level of competition, especially, I'm looking at you, Heather Hardy, even though I love you too, even though I love you too, you know what I'm saying? You're a veteran of this game, but that was a real wolf to the slaughter moment. And unfortunately, I don't like, and this is me just being honest, I haven't really liked in her last couple of fights how close these fights have been down the stretch, especially considering the level of competition once again. So although I agree that she's a great option, I'm going in a different direction. I'm going 2-time. Give me Katie Taylor. Obviously, this was a huge consideration. I know generally I would say you can't really give Fighter of the Year to a fighter off of 1 fight. And technically that's the case here, but hear me out. This is a 2-fight series, right? And after that first fight with Chantel Cameron for the unification, getting the second full division weight class unified title, she fell short, and I thought it looked like it was such a clear win that I couldn't really imagine a way for Katie Taylor to not only come back right after and make it happen, but to be able to have the second fight where honestly I thought there were some close rounds, but I thought it was pretty clear that Katie Taylor won, to make those level of adjustments at that championship level against another undisputed champion. obviously I wanted this award also to go to Chantel Cameron earlier in the year just because of what she accomplished in defending her belts. But this was the way the cookie crumbled, and what a moment for Katie Taylor. And I can't wait to watch that trilogy because I hope that's what ends up happening next for both of those women. So give me Katie Taylor, but I love both picks. I think they're great options. And I'm glad to see these ladies getting the recognition they deserve. Another honorable mention. This one gets a lot of hate, right? Because everyone, for some reason, loves to hate this woman, Clarissa Shields. Man, I think obviously also inactive, but I'm a big fan of what she's been doing across 2 combat sports. And there's been talk of some other crazy things going on outside of boxing for her. So always interested in what's going on with Clarissa Shields. But
she's been very busy, but not in the ring. Like, she's been very busy when it comes to calling out the guys. Her and Alicia Baumgardner getting into it. Like, it's been a lot. And I guess we'll get into that when we talk about, our predictions for next year. But yeah, she's been very, very busy, and she could be busy in 2024 for sure.
And I love it because for so long it felt like she was in that unfortunate position where she was the person kind of complaining about how she has to run the family business, almost like as far as being a part of the boxing business. Like, you're like, hey, you're making a certain amount of bread. It's kind of hard for us regular folk to hear your arguments and be like, I feel what you're saying. But at the same time, a lot of what she's saying was true. And now that the sport is sort of evolving around her, it's only a matter of time, in my opinion, that they find appropriate opponents to sort of prop her up in the right way. And some of those names you mentioned are among those. So interested to see what happens with her moving forward. But next up, I'm really excited for this one. I think there were so many different ways we could go with this one. And I already know mine is a hipster pick. So I'll say that off the rip. So I'm going to force Damian to go first. Damian, why don't you give us your breakout performance of 2023?
All right.
Before you go, Damian, can you guys hear me and see me? On my end, it's
I can hear you. You're a little laggy on the video side of things, but let's just hope it catches up, if that's cool.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So for the breakout performance of the year, normally this goes to like a younger fighter who may have made that big performance on like an undercard and has really put himself out there, or it can go to like maybe an older fighter who finally got over the hump. But for my breakout performer of the year, they actually did it in a loss. And this is something that the host of the show will definitely appreciate. My breakout performance of the year goes to Francis Ngannou for standing toe-to-toe with the heavyweight champion of the world, Tyson Fury, which I didn't expect. Anytime we've had these fights where it's a mixed martial arts guy coming into the boxing world to take on a top boxer, normally it's one-sided because that boxer has the advantage of being somebody who's boxed for their entire lives, going against somebody who may be a good striker, but being a good striker in MMA is totally different than being a good puncher in boxing. It's two totally different things. But Francis Ngannou is one of those special guys who just has power, period. Doesn't matter if it's in the ring, octagon, the street. Like, that's the type of guy you don't want to get hit by no matter where it is. And he showed that against Tyson Fury. He actually showed some real good technique. Now, I don't know if Tyson Fury took the fight as seriously as he should have going into it, but that's not on Ngannou. Ngannou got in there and did what he's supposed to do. So he's going to be my breakout performer of the year. And just as far as like a backup, as far as somebody who's going to be more involved in boxing going forward, I'm going to go with Jaron Ennis. His performance over Roman Villa was just special, showing the power, the technique, the skill, the ability to play defense as well. He's known as just his power puncher, but his defense in that fight, because Villa could punch as well. His defense in that fight was special from Boots. So I'm gonna go with Boots as my guy, who's a young guy, but Francis Ngannou definitely put his name on the map in the boxing world, and could, if he really wants to pursue it, could get some really big fights in 2024 against other heavyweight contenders.
Wow, I love it. I think this is a fight that we're going to get deep into later on, right, for some of the other categories we have here. But definitely a huge breakout performance. I remember having this conversation right before the fight with you for all the reasons why there could be all these different things. And I remember feeling like a little, come on, bro, like, come on, Chris. I remember feeling that a little bit. So it was definitely a big vindicating moment for us MMA fans, and just couldn't be happier for the man, right? Francis Ngannou, his story and everything he's been through, not only what he's had to he had to come in his professional life as a fighter, is minuscule of what he's had to overcome in his life as a man. So nothing but respect for him, and love that you gave him the award there. But from now on, let's hold these honorable mentions, God damn it, because you took mine. You took my award away. I definitely did have Boots Ennis out of Philly. His performance against Royman Villa was very special because of who it was, right? Royman Villa was just coming off of this big upset victory against Rashidi Ellis, a fight that when I was watching it, hell of a comeback, a huge moment for him. So it was a sort of breakout versus breakout moment. And obviously, we knew what Royman Villa brought to the table as far as being someone that can come forward, someone that's going to be in your face throughout the entirety of the fight. And the way he was able to dispatch him going forward, going backwards, going left to right, it didn't matter how the fight was going. Boots was in control, and he's someone that really brings a level of flash and artistry that not many boxers have. As far as you could see a silhouette of some of his fights, man. You'll be like, yeah, I remember that. That was Boots. Boots did that. So shout out to Boots Ennis, man. That's someone we also will be talking about a lot more as we continue. But Julio, who is your 2023 breakout performance of the year?
Listen, you guys had two great selections. I could make the case for both of them as well. I'm just gonna, just to make things a little more interesting, I'm gonna throw in another option, and I have to give it to Puerto Rican monster Subriel Matias. He had a great performance against Ergashev on the undercard of Benavides versus Boo Boo. And I think he had such a great performance, in fact, that now he's in the conversation with fighters like Teofimo and Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia. So he put himself up in that picture with his performance. It was a fight where he started off a little off, I guess you can say. Had a fight party. People at the fight party were nervous, thought he was taking a lot of punishment, but I knew it was part of the plan, and he actually showed that. Started pushing right through Ergashev's punches and ended up getting the finish. Left him on his stool, actually. It takes a lot. It's one thing to knock a man out, but to make a man decide I don't want to fight anymore, that takes a lot. So I have to go with Matias for that.
I love to hear any shout out from my guy Subriel Matias, man. What a legend! And at this stage of his career, if I'm not mistaken, this isn't the first time, and this is consecutive times. I believe it's three. Is it 3 or 4 fights in a row where his opponent quit on the stool, reminiscent of the Nomaschenko run that Lomachenko had during his prime, where just fighters are feeling what's going on in these fights. And it's not one-sided fights, right? It's fights where they get their licks in too, but once they start feeling what's coming back, man, they don't want no parts of it. So love that shout out. And like you said, man, just one of the more devastating punchers that we've gotten to witness in the modern era, if you ask me. And if you don't know who he is, man, tune into his fights because they're always all action affairs.
Yeah, for sure. That's one fighter you can 100% say is dangerous with some of the things he's committed in that ring. So,
ooh, damn, I need to take a shower after that one, Julio. We're not even going to continue down that road. But next up, really excited to get into this one because there's so many different options, right? So many different ways we could go. Our 2023 knockout of the year. I'm gonna take the lead on this one because I don't want this one to be gone when I get the chance, because just how special it was for me. Brian Mendoza against Sebastian Fundora. I'm a big fan of fighters who have their own style, right? Fighters where immediately, like I said about Boots, if you see their silhouette, you know exactly who they are. Fundora is one of those guys, right? Fundora, he is an anomaly in most weight classes, but especially at his weight, the size that he brings to the table is just so strange, right? It's almost watching a giraffe fight a hippo out there. And what a comeback win for Brian Mendoza, who was going through it early in that fight, man. Took a lot of big shots, big uppercuts, and really had to keep himself in the fight in order to land the shot that he eventually did. I believe it was a left hook that just marbleized Stephen Fulton. And the way Obviously, the knockouts have different degrees of severity, in my opinion. But the way he sort of, you could tell he was out before he even hit the ground, and the way that you get that bounce, right, that dribble off the canvas, man. There was nobody home at that point. So what a devastating knockout by Brian Mendoza, and just the shock factor of it as well, right? A fight where he was getting dominated at points, and it felt like maybe it would have been a justified stoppage had it ended. So shout out to Brian Mendoza. What a knockout. And it's that kind of year once again. I won't be surprised if that's nowhere near you guys' list. So I'm going to throw back to you, Julio. Who's your knockout of the year?
Chris, that you saying that just brings me back to how we started the conversation and this being possibly the best year in boxing, because it's been so many great fights, so many great knockouts that I almost forget that fight happened this year. It feels like it may have been so much longer ago. So it's actually, it wasn't on my list. I was actually leaning towards at first I was leaning towards Rayo versus Chris Colbert. A little bit of recency bias on there. That one was really good, but I had to again dig back through the long archive of fights we had this year. And I think I have to go with Nakatani against Andrew Maloney. I think that might be my knockout of the year. The performance itself was so dominant from someone trying to gain the championship from the champion, but to finish it the way he did in the 12th round with that overhand left, it was almost frightening the way Maloney went down. I think I have to give it to Nakatani on that one.
Whew, man, I love that you got that one on the list, because man, it looked like Maloney was shot out of a cannon with the way he fell after that one. So hell of a knockout there. Damian, what's your knockout of the year?
Yeah, I actually had both of those fights that you guys named as my options for the knockout of the year. Brian Mendoza, that was crazy. That left hook connected, and like you said, Fundora was out on his feet, and then he connected with two more punches just to make sure. As you hear Tim Burrs, a guy who's 6'5", fighting at 154, falls down like that. That was a very, very impressive. Nakatani, that also could have been like a breakout performance of the year, because that was on the undercard of Henry Lomachenko. So that was one where people really got their eyes on, like, who's this guy who's dominating Andrew Maloney like this? Because Maloney's a good fighter. Maloney's somebody who could be a world titleist if he gets the right break, right? If he gets the right break against the right opponent, could definitely be a world titleist. And for him to get dominated in that way by Nakatani was very impressive. You mentioned that overhand left, the timing on that overhand left to catch Maloney coming in like that, that was special. That was special. That knockout there was crazy. But like you said, a lot of great knockouts this year. A lot of great performances. So those two were tied for me for my knockout of the year.
Wow, I love it. What a perfect way to cap off that award. Just so many different great options. I think underrated one as well is Terrence Crawford's performance, obviously against Errol Spence, the most anticipated fight of the year, hands down, and it delivered in a way that I definitely didn't expect. So even though I remember debating with a lot of people saying, hey, make sure you tune in because Terrence Crawford's about to style on Errol Spence. And then people were like, no. I'm like, nah, actually, it'll probably be a close fight, but I think it should be pretty one-sided. And then we ended up getting that kind of a gem of a performance from Terrence Crawford. So once again, speaks to the year in boxing and the things we've got to see where that one's barely on our radar for knockout of the year. But now it's time for my most anticipated award of the year, right? The one I was most excited when I sent out the list. The Are You Dead Ass Award. The what the fuck is going on here? How does this happen moment of 2023? And I'm going to start off with mine because I have a good feeling that mine is not involved in yours, because there's some very, very obvious ones that we can point to say the less. Yeah. But mine is the judges of the Tyson Fury Francis Ngannou fights. Listen, I am someone who is obviously a big Tyson Fury fan, right? When we did our last sort of big show, I had him in my top 5 pound for pound, and not a lot of people have him there. So I'm not some Fury hater here. So let me make that clear in the first place. But the fact that not only did Francis Ngannou lose, but the fact that he lost unanimously, right? The fact that not one of those judges saw a world where Francis Ngannou could win was heartbreaking for me, because obviously there's one thing, and people always speak to this, right? You could win the narrative of the fight, but not win the fight. And obviously that was the case here, given the way the judges scored it. But I think in general, regardless of that, I think even some of those closer rounds, when we really look at what's landing, once again, but the MMA side of me will say that there's a lot of very clear difference in some of the things going in either man's direction as far as their punches landed and the sort of reaction they got. So just the biggest sad moment, right, where we've got this fight lined up in the future between Tyson Fury and between Alexander Usyk. We can't fuck this up, right? Like, there's no way we could even entertain the fact that he lost this one. Let's make sure he gets through. And listen, I hate to be that guy to be like, oh, boxing is corrupt, because that is always the storyline when talking about boxing. I think for the most part they aren't. But the fact that nobody saw this fight for Francis Ngannou is criminal to me. God damn it! So are you dead ass Saudi Arabia? But hey, I don't blame them, because they might have got their head chopped off and sent back home on the way out of Saudi if they did score it the other way. But I'm gonna throw to you, Damian. What was your "Are you dead ass" moment of the year?
So my "Are you dead ass" moment of the year goes to an entire situation. So let me break down this entire situation. I think Chris knows where I'm going with this. So there was a title match for a vacated title at 140 between Raleigh Romero and Ismael Barrazo. So before I even get into the fight, which is the ultimate "Are you dead ass" moment, why is Raleigh Romero fighting for a vacated world title at 140? What has he done in his career to deserve a title shot at 140, let alone at any weight class? But he moved up from 135 to 140, and his first fight at 140 is fighting for a world title. That shouldn't happen unless you were dominant in your previous weight class. Example, Devin Haney, the top guy at 135, moves up to 140, gets a title shot. That makes sense because he was the top guy at 135. For Raleigh Romero, who had a very shallow resume and then goes and gets knocked out by Tank, and somehow turns getting knocked out by Tank into a world title shot at 140 against Ismael Barrazo. Are you dead ass? And then we get into the fight itself. Raleigh Romero going against Ismael Barrazo. Ismael Barrazo is listed at 40. No disrespect to Barrazo, but my man was out there looking like he was 65. But he listed at 40. Ismael Barrazo got one punch, straight left hand. He is busting Raleigh Romero's ass with this straight left hand. Raleigh Romero has no answer for this straight left hand, busting him up. Raleigh Romero finally starts to mount some offense. I believe this is the 9th round. The referee is veteran Tony Weeks. Tony Weeks, if you're a boxing fan, you know about Tony Weeks. He's had that same box cut forever. I've been watching boxing for 25 plus years. He's had that same box cut forever. It's iconic at this point. He's a Hall of Fame referee. So no disrespect to him. He's a Hall of Fame referee. He's refereed dozens upon dozens of championship matches. But this was not his night. So again, Barrazo's busting up Raleigh Romero. Raleigh Romero finally starts to mount some offense. As soon as he mounts a little offense, Tony Weeks jumps in and stops the fight. Raleigh Romero didn't land anything clean. This was the worst stoppage in boxing history. Now, I know some of the old heads, when they hear that, they're going to think about Julio Cesar Chavez versus Meldrick Taylor from back in the day. Meldrick Taylor, that fight was stopped with 2 seconds left. Meldrick Taylor was ahead on the scorecards, would have won if the fight would have went forward. But the reason this one is worse is because there was no damage being done. Raleigh Romero was not landing any punches, and Ismael Barrazo was fine when they stopped the fight. At least in the Meldrick Taylor fight, Meldrick Taylor was taking damage the second half of that fight. And the evidence is afterwards, he was never the same after that fight. So even though he was winning that fight, the damage was obvious. Tony Weeks, for some reason, I think he saw an older guy in the ring, got nervous, and was like, oh, I got to stop this before Raleigh Romero, who's in his mid-20s, hurts this guy. So I think he had bias going into the fight, and that's what made this so bad. So it started off with Raleigh Romero even being in a title match to start with, which ridiculous. Just totally ridiculous. And then he's gifted a world title by a "Are You Dead Ass" decision by Tony Weeks. And Roddy Romero now can walk around and actually say he's a world champion when he sucks. He absolutely stinks. So for me, my "Are You Dead Ass" moment is the whole entire situation behind Roddy Romero becoming a world champion at 140 because he got this gifted decision against Roddy Romero because of Tony Weeks.
And I love the emphasis on all these different angles because it couldn't have happened to a worse person, right? Like that's a big part of it for me about why I hate this moment so much as well, and why I was excited to sort of tee someone up for it because I knew it was coming. This is right. You will want your champion to be someone that's, I'm in the gym next week. I'm looking forward. No, he's out here making videos about how he'd rather be fucking bitches than hugging sweaty men in the gym. And at the same time, I get it, right? Like I do get it at face value. But when you ain't even earned the title and that's your mentality, just speaks to the level of hand-picked opponent you're about to be for whoever decides to take your belt. And I'm sure there's a lot of guys begging for that spot. So I love that. Julio, you're up. What is our "Are You Dead Ass" moment of the year? And I completely failed on the ticker until just
listen, I'm glad Damian went first because I agree 100%, but he worded it way better than I could have. I agree 100%. Everything leading up to the fight, to how the fight turned out is "Are You Dead Ass" worthy. I agree 100%. Tony Weeks is actually one of my favorite referees, but I cannot understand for the life of me what he was seeing that made him stop that fight. But your analysis makes sense. He was probably went in with bias. He said, "This is somebody's grandfather. I'm not gonna let him die in this ring."
Exactly.
And so he felt like he had to stop it. What makes it more dramatic is the fact that I think Ismail was probably winning the fight up until that point.
Definitely.
So you got rid of this man who's trying to build generational wealth for his great grandchildren. Ridded him of that opportunity, and gave it to someone who shouldn't have even been given that opportunity to begin with. So my choice is also Rolly versus Ismail. I just want to say I'm glad none of you said Haney versus Loma. I was ready to argue, so I'm glad none of you said that.
I love that. I love that this comes full circle though, because I didn't get to mention to you earlier. I was like, you know what? Respect to you as a Haney fan for admitting that it's controversial. Because I know some people that I try to have this argument with, and they're like, well, it's not even a debate. And I'm like, all right, now you're lying. Like this.
It was a close fight for sure. It was a close fight for sure.
Yeah. Listen, sure. I personally, the night I watched the fight, when we were at the end of round 11, I had Loma up 1 round. So I was nervous. Loma obviously gave up the 12th, and I had it as a draw. So I know it was a close fight. I know it could have gone either way. I think all the robbery talk is crazy. So that's why I was scared one of you would have that as the "Are You That Ass" moment, because I was ready to argue. But yeah, it was a close fight, a classic fight. Could have gone either way. But ultimately, Haney got the decision.
Yeah, there's no way I could have went with that one when there wasn't a knockdown in the fight, right? I mean, at least Ngannou got the knockdown, God damn it. But that's one of those fights that I watched, and I was like, man, as a fan, I wish this was 15 rounds, right? Because if it was 15 rounds, I think it's very clear who would have been the winner of that fight. But that's not the world we live in, God damn it. Shout out to Sean Negrong. I just wanted to throw this up as a throwback Thursday. Are You Dead Ass moment when Pac-Man was robbed against Horn. Said he didn't care. Was livid at 4 a.m. when that fight finished. And that's a great shout, man. Pac-Man has been robbed twice, man. That fight against what's his
Timothy
name?
Bradley.
Hey, thank you. I was about to say Timothy Bradley. Oh man, and the fact that he had a whole career off that moment too just makes it even more heartbreaking, if you ask me. But once again, a big reason why this is an institution. The "Are You Dead Ass" award ain't going nowhere. Next year, we might just have subsections of the "Are You Dead Ass," and there won't even be any other awards. We'll see. Hopefully, we get there at some point. But before we move on, I'm excited for this one because if anyone knows, I'm sure Damian does. Sometimes, you get homework and you do your homework and you're at class, you know, and you did what was expected of you. But once it all said and done, you got to remember, right? You got to remember the truth. There's pop quizzes in this bitch too, right? There's other questions that you're not necessarily prepared for that I'm gonna make you guys have answers for. So I'm gonna start throwing early and often. I'm throwing it right to Julio with asking, who is, in your opinion, the dark horse of 2023? Who was the fighter that had an under the radar year, right? Someone that achieved some things or whatever, however you might want to look at it, but is doing all the right things, but isn't getting the credit they deserve, and you're looking forward to their 2023. Mine is going to come out of left field to everyone, but mine is a women's boxer by the name of Sky Nicholson. She is a young fighter, right? Has been on the undercard of a lot of different bigger stage women's events, but she's a fighter that I think really needs to be taken seriously when it comes to the title picture. I think her game is very consistent, and having that out of a young fighter is, in my opinion, the golden ticket to success. When you have someone that is consistent, knows what they want to accomplish when they get into these fights, and regularly goes out there and does it. Obviously, you'd love to see a little bit more finishing power in her game, and I'm sure that's something that will develop as she continues to grow and earn her grown woman strength. But Sky Nicholson is someone that I've been really impressed by, and I don't think is getting enough love in the women's division. So Damian, no, I lied. So Julio, who is your dark horse of 2023?
You put me on the spot a little bit, but immediately somebody comes to mind for me, and it might not say it's a dark horse for hardcore boxing fans, but just speaking in general of the boxing community and the sports community, I got to go with David Benavidez. He's for years been trying to make a claim at undisputed at 168, calling out Canelo. Canelo years ago responded with, "You haven't fought anybody." So what has David Benavidez done this year? He's gone ahead and he's been beating everybody. But even with that, he's not as popular of a name as I think he should be. But he's taking the steps to get that major fight that he wants. So in 2024, I think it'll be an amazing year for him because of what he's been doing under the radar this past year.
Love that show. I love that one. Another fighter that is on their way, right? You see their fight, you know they're on their way. So, Damian, who you got? Who is your dark horse of 2023?
I love the pick of David Benavidez. You know, I'm a big Demetrius Andrade fan, and for him to demolish Andrade in the way that he did after beating a very game Caleb Plant in the same year, he definitely deserves some recognition. So I like that pick right there. Another guy who's under the radar, and it's not his fault, but it seems like he's just in the wrong division. Right now, the middleweight division in boxing is kind of a wasteland, right? Normally you think about like cruiserweight division being the wasteland. Middleweights usually have like a illustrious history. But right now, Janabek, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, but boxing fans know who I'm talking about. Janabek in the middleweight division is dangerous, man. Like, this dude has every tool in the book: the footwork, the hand speed, the power, the left uppercut, straight left hand. Like, everything he does with that left hand is just massively dangerous. And we just have to find an opponent for him. Maybe he has to move to 168 because I don't really see it at 160. But I have to like dig deeper and, you know, really dig into it at 160. But if he moves up to 168 and gets into that conversation with the Charlos and with Andrade and with these other guys, unless Andrade's talking about moving back down to 160, maybe we can make that fight happen. But Janabek is one of the most talented boxers in boxing. And if he was fighting in a different weight class, he would be in the pound for pound conversations.
I love it. I might rebrand this award next year as the shout out to Despicable Me, the Minions. This is the One of Us award, because as both of you guys got into it, man, I'm like, damn, I love those picks, but are they even fucking dark? I'm out here pulling out Sky Nicholson, and everyone's like, and those two guys are definitely legit forces in the landscape of boxing today. So I love it. This is the One of Us award moving forward. But next up, we're going to look forward to 2024. It's only right we put a bow on 2023, that we look ahead and think of some of the matchups and potential career-defining moments that might be on the horizon for us to witness. This is some of my favorite things to do, right? I call it mental masturbation, right? We're here just thinking of all the different ways that these things can go, and it's really exciting, arousing even. So with all that said, let's look ahead to 2024. I'm going to start with giving you guys my most anticipated fight for 2024. And this is a really, man, I've been geeking to talk about this, and I love that y'all brought up David Benavidez because he is one half of this fight. And I know all the casuals are gonna hear this and be like, "Yeah, we need that Canelo fight." Fuck you guys. That is not the fight that I'm interested in. That is a fight that at this point it's very irrelevant in the conversation. I need in my eye holes in 2024 David Benavidez against David Morrell. It's the same name. This is after this, the other one got to change their first name. The matchup of these different middleweights, man, the matchup style-wise just guarantees an absolute firefight. Two guys that come forward and have devastating knockout power and have proven their stake in the division despite being young. This is the real fight, right? Everyone's talking about how the fight in this division is Canelo. Canelo went running years ago. He's no longer a part of this division, if you ask me. These are the two guys that I really think are the future here. And I agree with what you said earlier, Julio. I think it's a surprise that he isn't a bigger star than he is at the moment. I think this is someone that the Mexican fan base has already got behind, right? You see all these different Mexican boxing legends talking about how he can be the greatest Mexican boxer ever. That's a conversation that a lot of the Mexican greats don't ever even entertain when talking about Canelo. But I think it's about style and what he brings to the table. And that's why this is the fight I need, man. People sleep on Morrell because obviously he hasn't gotten a showcase against the bigger names. But I think this fight is going to be just absolute chef's kiss violence until the end. And whoever wins is going to be the future of not just this division, but boxing in general. Because I could see either of these guys going up and fighting for other titles too. So give me David Morrell, David Benavidez. God damn it. And
I love that pick. I love that pick. That's definitely one where you have two guys who have skill, but also are ready to go to war. And that's one where that could be definitely a fight of the year in 2024 if it does happen. You mentioned Canelo. Canelo's already trying to make excuses to not fight David Benavidez next year, talking about, well, we're going to do it for September. But if it doesn't happen in September, maybe it'll happen in 2025. Like, what? What are you talking about right now? Like 2025? Like, what are you even doing? You have no excuse. And the rumors that he's gonna fight Jaime McGill.
Oh man,
really? Jaime McGill? What has he done to earn a title shot at 168? Another one where it's like he's had some great fights, but come on, we can't be doing that. And mentioned we gotta do our fight of the year for 2023 as well. But as far as our most anticipated fight for next year, there's a lot of good fights out there, but I got to go with Dimitri Bivol versus the winner of Arthur Beterbiev, Caleb Smith, to finally unify 175. We've been waiting for Arthur Beterbiev to have somebody who can truly challenge him in a major way because he's just been walking through everybody, knocked out everybody he's fought. And I think Dimitri Bivol can definitely do that. I think Caleb Smith, that fight's actually going to be pretty good. So people don't sleep on that fight, Caleb Smith versus Arthur Beterbiev. I think Caleb Smith's going to come to fight in that one. It's not going to back down. So we're going to have a good fight as long as it lasts in that one. But the winner of that fight versus Dimitri Bivol, I think could be a fight of the year candidate. Dimitri Bivol also hasn't really been challenged. The fight he had on Judgment Day, on the fight he had on Day of Reckoning, wasn't really a good fight. He just he said it himself. It was a good sparring match, basically, what he had on Day of Reckoning. So we need to see him truly challenged. And I think that him versus Arthur Beterbiev could be one of those classic all-time fights.
Such a great shout, man. You're so right. I got so pumped for 2024. I left an award behind. God damn it. We'll spin the block after this, after Julio goes, and we'll get that one sorted out. But Julio, what is your most anticipated fight of 2024?
This one was tough. This was probably the one category where I didn't come up with an answer before the show. I figured I'd just come on and let my thoughts flow and see what I come up with. Better Biev and Bivol was definitely up there. That's one we've been asking for years. Chris and I, we went to see Better Biev versus Joe Smith at Madison Square Garden, and since then we've wanted to see him versus Bivol. The only thing that makes me nervous about that fight is that Better Biev is pushing 40 now. So it scares me that if Bivol wins, I'll feel like it's because Better Biev got old. So that alone, has me a little hesitant, but I still definitely want to see it. It has to be in 2024. If it's not this year, then it probably won't make sense for it to happen later. I definitely have Benavidez versus Canelo in there. I would love to see Benavidez versus Morrell. That would be a very risky fight for Benavidez, though, considering Morrell is up and coming. He's not really known outside of hardcore boxing fans. So it's a really high risk, low reward fight, because losing that fight to Morrell, which I think he might, I'm going to say it now, if they do fight, I think Morrell might win that. But losing that fight will basically lose him everything he's been working up towards in the past couple years in an instant. So it's definitely a very risky fight. Tank versus Haney. That's one that we've been asking for quite some time. And again, it's unsure if we might even see it in 2024. Tank, he's the king of rehydration clauses right now. He made Ryan come down to 136. So it's very hard to imagine he'd go up to 140 with no rehydration clause to fight Haney. Haney already said he wouldn't fight with a rehydration clause. But that would be one fight where I think stylistically Haney can definitely outbox Tank. But Tank is a very good boxer too, and he can find his shots. So we'd be at the edge of our seats the entire time, knowing that at any moment Tank can end it. It's so many. I can't think of just one that I want to see most, but I'm gonna go with the most cliche answer. We haven't seen an undisputed heavyweight champion in how long?
20 years.
So it's only a matter of time before we see that. I want to see it. I really do not like Fury. I'm on the opposite end of Chris. I was very happy to see how Ngannou fought against Fury. It kind of proved something that I've been saying years ago, that Fury's only able to use his size to really dominate opponents. And once he has someone that's his size, he can't do it. But it'll be very interesting to see Usyk's boxing ability. And it's a matter of time that we get an undisputed heavyweight champion. I think that will really put the cherry on the top for what boxing is starting to become. And it's going to, really help it take off. So I'm going to go with Fury versus Usyk on this one.
I love it. So we're going to go reverse round robin before we finish things off. We need our predictions on these fights too, God damn it. So we're going to start with Julio's Fury versus Usyk. I've thought about this fight long and for many different occasions at this point. So there's a lot of different ways that I feel about this fight. But ultimately, I think my bias is what's going to come into play here. I'm going to be picking Tyson Fury for this fight. I feel like what you said as far as utilizing his frame as an attribute, I think his ability to do that specifically in the clinch and slow things down when they get going is what's going to keep this fight safe for him. I think Usyk can definitely outwork Fury from what we've seen, not just lately, but even in his past, where as the fight goes on, sure, he does wear out his opponents, but he's also getting worn out too. And if he's with someone that can keep up with him and sort of keep up with that clinch style like Ngannou has, he could definitely end up gassing late. But I just feel like this matchup is not conducive to that. Although I'm a big fan of Usyk too and what he's been able to accomplish in his career and his technical style, right? I love his game. I just think it's going to be hard in this matchup to bring his skills to bear. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the keys for this fight is Usyk's jab. I think if he's able to settle that jab early and really make it a big part of the fight, I feel like he could definitely, like I said, tire out Tyson Fury. But I feel like the more things continue to get on the inside, the more I think Fury is going to be able to dissuade him from coming in. So I'm going Tyson Fury. Damian, who you got?
Oh man, this one is really tough, right? I didn't like the way Usyk looked in his last fight. You can make an argument that Daniel Dubois should have won that fight because that was a body shot. That was not a low blow. That was a clear body shot on a high belt that Usyk had there. And, Usyk was able to, that was very smart of him, very high boxing IQ to act like it was a low blow and, to fool a referee who somehow continues to be the referee in Usyk's matches. I don't know how that's happening, but I feel like there's going to be a different referee for sure against Tyson Fury. Fury's size, man, that size difference is major. We saw it in the Wilder fights where he was able just to wear down Wilder, even Wilder getting as big as he can. Wilder got to 238 in their last fight and still was 40 pounds lighter than Tyson Fury. Usyk is a different monster than Wilder, though, because Usyk actually knows how to box, unlike Wilder. So I think that I'm going to go Usyk by decision. It may be more hopeful than anything, but I think he'll be able to just outwork Fury, but it'll be a very, very interesting fight. That's one where you truly don't know what's going to happen going in because the styles are so different. The body types are so different. Two just totally different people, with Fury wanting to sing after the fight and talk all the trash in the world. Usyk being this very unique individual who, just kind of stays to himself for the most part. They just total opposites in every end of the spectrum. I think it's going to make for a very, very interesting fight. I'll take Usyk by decision.
I love it. And go ahead, Julio.
Yeah, last but not least, I agree with both of you. But my prediction is Fury as well. I'm going Fury by decision. Again, I do not like Fury at all, but I just think that size difference is going to be way too much for Usyk. I do think Usyk is the better boxer. I think he's more skilled. But it's very hard to imagine a scenario where that size doesn't affect Usyk. And then we've seen it is debatable whether that shot by the boy was a low blow or a body shot. But nonetheless, it did show weakness in the body of Usyk. Yeah. And Fury does go to the body a lot. So my prediction is Fury, but I will be rooting for Usyk the entire time.
I love that designation because it's important to make that very clear. But yeah, that fight I'm really excited for because we could show up and I just feel like no matter who wins, we're going to be in for a surprise that night, like just based on how it happens or whatever the case may be. So looking forward to that. So I'm just going to remind the people right off the top, my pick was the double David matchup, right? I got David Morrell, David Benavidez. Who you got, Julio, in that matchup? I know you tipped your hand a little bit, but why are you going with Morrell in that case?
I'm going to go with Morrell. I think overall he does possess the better boxing ability. I think David's strengths are more on the physical side, so he's very quick and he's able to use his size. But I think Morrell will be able to neutralize that a bit. I do think he has the better footwork. David Benavidez tends to be a little more flat-footed. He's able to use his size to corner his opponents a little more, and that's where he's able to lay off huge barrages of punches. But I think David's footwork and power, David Morrell's footwork and power are going to make Benavidez a little more hesitant to do what he's been able to do to some of his other opponents. And I'm going to have to go with Morrell for that reason. I don't know if it'll be a stoppage because Benavidez has shown a pretty good chin, but I think ultimately Morrell will get the win.
I'm gonna go Benavidez. I'm gonna go Benavidez just because of those physical attributes that you mentioned. He's like a Terminator. Like he just keeps coming forward. Eventually, he's going to get to you, right? No matter how good of a boxer you are. We saw with Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant's a very good boxer, and he gave Benavidez trouble. And Benavidez eventually cornered him, let off those barrage of punches. Andrade, right? Everybody remembers, the last couple of rounds, but Andrade was giving him trouble. Andrade was able to let off combinations. And the next thing you know, he landed that big shot in the fourth round. And then from there, was able to take control because of his power and just those physical attributes that he has. So I'm going to go with Benavidez, but a very good, very close fight between Morrell and Benavidez. And like you say, it's a huge risk for Benavidez. So that's one of the reasons I'm hesitant on if it's going to happen or not, because Benavidez has finally got to the point where he can now say, I've done what I'm supposed to do for the Canelo fight. And even though Morrell versus Benavidez might be more, beneficial to the boxing heads, as far as his pockets, of course, it's the Canelo fight. And he's done enough to earn that fight. So I think that he's going to be more risk averse now when it comes to his opponents, even though it's not in Benavidez's nature to duck anybody, quote unquote. I think it'd just be smarter for him to be like, okay, it's time for me to fight Canelo. Let's make it happen. Let's put the pressure on him to make Canelo make this fight happen. So I think that he's going to be on that mission of, okay, I'm going to fight somebody in the meantime while Canelo's trying to make this fight in May with Jaime Mejia or whoever. And then I'll be ready for Canelo. But I don't think it's going to be Morrell just because of that. But I do hope we see it. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I don't think we see it this year.
Yeah.
Great shouts all around, man. I love this matchup. I think personally, I would lean more towards Benavidez just because of I think he's more battle tested, and we've seen him take big shots and overcome those moments. We haven't really seen that out of Morrell just yet. And I think also too, a big part of what you said, Julio, as far as maybe not being the more technical fighter, I feel like his style is one that if he can get past, right, if he can avoid getting stuck on the outside against a more physical fighter, I feel like that style just wears on you when you're someone that is used to being so technical and staying within yourself. When you got someone just downpouring on you, it is very exhausting. So that's why I would go in that direction. But I agree. I feel like skill for skill, he doesn't get the credit he deserves. And I just love that we were able to go on about this because both of those guys are some of my favorite guys to watch. But next up, why don't you remind the people what your pick is and throw it whatever direction you want to go, Damian.
As far as for the most anticipated fight?
Yep.
So for my most anticipated fight, it was Dimitri Bivol versus Arthur Beterbiev or Caleb Smith. I don't want to disrespect him. Whoever wins the fight between Beterbiev and Caleb Smith going against Dimitri Bivol. So just for the sake of argument, let's assume it's Beterbiev. I think Bivol will be able to defeat Beterbiev because of his footwork. Bivol, his footwork isn't as fancy as, say, a Lomachenko or a Bam Rodriguez, where they use that footwork to get those angles on you to unleash their punches. But his feet are constantly busy. In his last fight that was on Saturday at Day of Reckoning, he had his opponent just nervous from the footwork, literally just jabbing at him, just ifing at him, just feigning at him. And the opponent could never get in the rhythm, could never get comfortable because he just never knew when Bivol was coming. And I think because of that footwork and his ability to get out of danger while also being offensive, it's going to make it hard for Beterbiev to land one of those monster shots that he has. And Bivol seems like he could take a good punch. We've seen him take a few good punches, but he doesn't get hit that often to where we know if he has like a crazy good chin, but he doesn't leave himself open to take those clean shots. So I think Bivol could outbox Beterbiev and win a 12-round decision. We haven't seen Bivol get a knockout in 6 years now. I thought he was going to get a knockout on Day of Reckoning. I lost some money because of that. Not bitter or anything, but I thought he was going to finally get a knockout there. But I think Bivol can outbox Beterbiev. It'll be a good fight for sure because Beterbiev's not a bad boxer by any means. But Bivol, his footwork, his ability to parry punches, he does a great job of doing that. It's a very underrated aspect, being able to parry punches and to work off of catch and shoots. He does a great job of that. He's just all around, has everything outside of that killer instinct. That's the only thing he's missing, where he doesn't go after the kill. But besides that, he has everything you need to win. So I think Bivol would be either Caleb Smith or Beterbiev.
Man, I just got to jump in here before I even give my pick and say you can see why Damian Adams is my goddamn go-to guy when it comes to getting a guest for my boxing previews and predictions. Because, man, when you come on this show and you break down a guy's defensive game to the audience, that's a level of commitment to the game that you casually you're ready to comprehend, goddammit. So love that breakdown. Love the way you shouted that out. And I agree, man. I would go with Bivol in that matchup too. You love to see a fighter, like you said, that uses his legs as a weapon, right? I'm a big fan of MMA. But who knows, right? If we got kicks in there, maybe Bivol would definitely be a crazy all-rounded level fighter, man. Who knows? But as far as using them as a weapon in anticipatory ways, Bivol is that guy, and I agree. It's the same knock of a lot of different fighters we talked about earlier, but just you wish you would see more finishing instinct out of them. But at the end of the day, if you're a fan of boxing and you know what to look out for, the truths of boxing, Bivol is one of the best in the game, and in my opinion, deserves some more recognition for Fighter of the Year for what he was able to accomplish. But I would go with Bivol. Julio, who you got?
This one is a very tough one to choose. My prediction changes after each one of them have a fight. If you asked me 2 years ago after that fight we went to against Joe Smith Jr., I had better BF. Then after what I saw against Canelo, I had Bivol. My opinion always changes. I will say off rip, if Callum Smith somehow beats Better BF, I don't really care to see Bivol versus Callum Smith. Just because I'm pretty sure Bivol is going to win pretty easily. But yeah, like you said, Damian, don't sleep on Better BF's boxing ability. He's not just a puncher. He does have, if I'm not mistaken, a 100% knockout rate, but that's not all he is. He creates his shots, and he has power in both hands to do it. Bivol, on the other hand, gets hit less than any other boxer in all of boxing, if I'm not mistaken. So it'll be hard for him to get the shots, but with his technicalities, with his relentlessness, it's very hard to imagine he won't land a couple really hard shots on Bivol. And I really just don't know how he's going to react to them. It's like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the mouth. That footwork might get neutralized very quickly once he feels a shot to the liver,
Yeah.
But ultimately, I'm more of a fan of Better BF, but I'm gonna give the slight edge to Bivol, just because, like you both said, he is the better boxer. He's very skilled. He's very defensively sound. And typically, when it's a puncher versus a boxer, I lean towards the boxer. So I'm gonna go Bivol also.
I love that we ended this conversation here, and now we're circling the block back to 2023 because I'm a shit host and I'm sick, but it's okay. We're gonna get all of our awards out no matter what's the cost. God damn it! So our 2023 year in review, fight of the year. I think it's important that I sort of set it all up this way because we just finished talking about this guy, and I'm pretty sure going first here that no one else is going to have this pick as their fight of the year. So give me my guy, Artur Beterbiev against Anthony Yard. Holy shit. Don't tell me you forgot about that one, you guys. I just got to say, Anthony Yard is all time when you consider the, oh shit, that's the guy you fighting award. when you get the pictures, right? You're showing your mom the I'm pretty sure he showed his parents the the poster, like, hey, look, yeah, I'm about to have another main event. And they're like, hold on, you fighting that guy? Yeah, Yard is all time when it comes to getting off the bus. But when it actually came down to the fight, man, both of these guys not only took so much, right, but that fight is the epitome of what Teddy Atlas is something that he always says, which is all you train the fighter is to be ready to show up in that moment and behave like a fighter. And both of those guys, through all kinds of adversity, behaved like champions and went after it in a way that was fucking brutal to watch, man. There was multiple times in that fight, back and forth, where I'm like, man, this might be it. Like it might be over. And that was another one where unfortunately, it sucks that you're watching a great fight and it changes the way you think about someone, right? But that was another moment, right, watching that fight where I'm like, damn, man, like if he's getting caught coming in some of these ways here, like it feels like a battle against Bivol isn't going to be the best thing for him. But completely different person, completely different challenge. Yard was game throughout the entirety of it and ate some hellacious blows that I was like, man, it's over. This one ended up being more of like a war of attrition, if you ask me, as far as being the guy that can outlast. And even through that war, Beterbiev, in my opinion, started to look a little worse for wear too as that fight went on, and still, once again, behaved like a champion. So that's my 2023 fight of the year, and I can't wait to hear what you guys got. So Julio, I'm throwing to you first. What's your 2023 fight of the year?
There are a lot of options, a lot to choose from. Again, this goes back to say that the long archive of history we saw this past year. I'm gonna let recency bias take over a little bit here, and I'm gonna go with Espinoza versus Robesi Ramirez, mainly because that not only was it a great fight, but it was also a championship fight. Um, we had multiple knockdowns in that fight on both sides, including a last-minute knockdown in the 12th round that could have possibly been the deciding factor in the decision of the fight. Um, Great back and forths throughout the entire fight. So yeah, I just got to go with Espinoza versus Ramirez, and I'm sure there's going to be a rematch that's going to be just as good as the first one.
No, that's a great choice right there. That fight, man, that fight, like I got up on the edge of my seat just thinking about that fight, man. That fight was crazy. Another fight that had me on the edge of my seat. I'm not a big fan of this guy. Or I shouldn't say I'm not a big fan of this guy. I'm not a big fan of the way this guy's been managed. And I'm talking about Jaime Mejia. I'm not a big fan of the way he's been managed. I feel like he's been babied. He's been sheltered in his boxing career. And maybe that sheltering is going to work. If he's truly going to get a chance against Canelo in May, if he takes care of business against John Ryder in January, then it's been correct because he's going to get that big payday he's been waiting for. But he almost didn't get there because he had this war against Sergey Derevyanchenko. That fight was absolutely crazy. Like, to have Sergey Derevyanchenko, who is like the Buffalo Bills of boxing, right? The Buffalo Bills in the 90s just kept getting to the Super Bowl, couldn't get over that hump. That's Sergey Derevyanchenko. He keeps getting to the Super Bowl, just couldn't get over the hump. And this fight, I thought he did it. I thought he won this fight. This fight was one that was back and forth. You saw Derevyanchenko be able to hurt the younger Mejia as they just went at each other the entire 12 rounds. And I had it scored, if I remember correctly, 115, 113 for Derevyanchenko. But it was one of those fights where you couldn't say it was a robbery because it was so close and it was so action-packed, and it just didn't stop. Like, you couldn't – most fights you have a time in a round where you can look down and you can put your notes down. Like, normally I'm taking notes as I'm judging fights. But this fight I had to wait between rounds to do everything because there was no stopping in the action at all. Absolutely great fight. One of the reasons I wasn't too mad about DAZN raising their prices up on me and taking more of my bank account than I was ready for. But because fights like this on that channel made it worth it, though. Derevyanchenko versus Jaime Mejia was classic.
Yeah,
I just gotta say, the
membership.
representation. I love that we got the top three fights, in my opinion, that deserve to be in this combo. We all listed them. Sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying, Julio?
No, I piggyback off Damian. I actually stopped my DAZN membership after they raised the prices. I said, "Oh man, y'all starting pay-per-views and y'all raising the prices now?"
Yeah, that's the crazy part. Like, I wasn't aware of the price increase. I'm just glad I'm in a better space now than I was a couple years ago, because that really could have hurt a brother for real. Like, I saw that money come. I was like, "Yo, what's going on?" I even called him up. It was like, "We sent out the email. We let you guys know." I was like, I guess it's on me then. I guess it's on me for not paying attention. So, but I definitely got to make sure I take the automatic subscription off before next year for sure.
I love it. We got our guy in the chat going crazy. So I'm gonna throw this last one up before we move on. Devin Haney versus obviously Gervonta Davis, the recently converted Abdul Waleed, the biggest fight that can be made in 2024. And I agree that is one of the hugest fights that can be made in the landscape, and definitely one that I'm excited to see.
Can we get Tank versus somebody? Can we get Tank versus Shakur Stevenson versus Vasyl Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez versus somebody? Let's get you versus somebody, to where, because I don't want people, because Gervonta Tank Davis is definitely one of the faces of boxing. I still believe Canelo's the face of boxing, but he's one of the faces of boxing. He's one of those lower tiers as far as the faces of boxing. But I did my top 10 pound for pound list of the day to end 2023. And Chris saw it, where people were coming at me because I didn't have Gervonta Davis in my top 10. I'm like, bro, you can't be in the top 10 just because you make a spectacle. And people confuse a big fight spectacle with a top fight. Beating Ryan Garcia doesn't make you a top fighter. It makes you able to sell a fight, and that's amazing. You're able to sell a fight, but that's not a top guy. It doesn't make you a top 10 pound for pound fighter. So let's get Tank, or whatever his new name is. I'll respect it and call him by that. And let's get him against somebody for real, a real deal top guy.
And then another thing that plays on why so many people rank Tank so high is this whole 3-division champion thing.
Oh my God!
Let's
Yes.
be real. There are 4 major belts in every weight class. There are 4. There are secondary belts, belts that nobody cares about. If you're gonna count those secondary and nobody care about belts as a world title, then sure, he's a 3-division champion. But if we're being real, he's only been a world champion at 130.
Yep.
So I agree with you, Damian. I also don't have him on my pound for pound list for that reason.
Dude, one of my all-time rants from my pops. Shout out to Papa Negron. I know he's probably watching this right now. One of my favorite all-time rants out of him is the alphabet soup rant, where he's going up. So what was he? CWO, CWN. He's like, go on. He's like, get the alphabet soup. Pull out 3 letters. There's a fucking belt that somebody got. And I was dead, bro. I was like, this man is on one, but it is true. The amount of belts is really. Being a champion it's something to definitely look at, but there's a lot of people where you look back and they're like, this person is the Ring magazine champion, and you're like, oh, they're a champion, and then you look into it and you're like, oh yeah, they beat their step cousin to become the champ. Strange scenario, and then they got cooked by an actual champion later on. So I don't think that's the case with Gervonta too. I feel like Gervonta is such a rare fighter, and I think he is the epitome of a modern day version of what Mike Tyson was, as far as being this huge spectacle where everyone wants to tune into your fights. You're a big pay-per-view draw to the likes we've never seen for these lightweight classes, man. Like, if there's anyone that is a draw in those weight classes, it is Tank. So he is an anomaly in that way, but I agree, man. You got to get him against someone good so we can really have an idea of what we're looking at. Because
that's the thing, though. You mentioned that he is the Mike Tyson of this day. The difference is he hasn't fought his version of Evander Holyfield, his version of Lennox Lewis yet. So if he fights those guys and beats those guys, then he takes the next level. But if he fights those guys and gets dominated by them, then you're like, oh, he's just another Mike Tyson, where he had a great career, but he wasn't truly that top guy because he just was able to generate the money. It's great for him, great for his family. But when it comes to the legacy of boxing, we need to see him against people of his ilk this year, 2024. We need to see that.
And I think
it begs the question, why haven't we seen this? And it might be exactly what you were just saying, Damian, as far as whether or not he has a feeling that some of those matchups aren't going to be the best for him. Julio, what were you going to say?
Exactly what you were just going to say. If his team is able to make all this money having him fight cab drivers and make millions off of it. No offense to people he's not fighting cab drivers, except Rolly. Rolly's probably a former cab driver. But if he's able to fight these people and make all of this money for it, why risk fighting a world-class champion that might ruin all of that? So I think that's part of the reason. And in a business aspect, I understand it. As a fan of the sport, I hate it. So,
yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. I think with that, we move on. We finish up. We got 2 awards. Well, not really awards, but 2 mentions of 2024. What we think is going to happen.
Chris, I won't cut you off. But we do our underdog performance of the year.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, look at me, bro. I'm just the worst. Listen, I swear to God, don't go out here in these streets for the next 2 weeks, man. There's some nasty viral diseases going around. That is my excuse for why I'm such a terrible host today. But yes, our underdog performance of the year. Who would like to take the helm? I'll throw it out there.
I'll go first because mine is definitely recency bias. Very recent. Joseph Parker defeated Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder was a -700 favorite going into that fight, I believe. And Joseph Parker won pretty much each second of each round, as Deontay Wilder just threw wild right hands towards the end in attempt to try to get a knockout, but had no chance in that fight. Joseph Parker made his straight right hand just null and void in that one. And honestly, I just want to get my take off about Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder, what he's been able to accomplish in boxing without learning how to box is amazing. Like, he's never learned how to box, but somehow became a bronze medalist. That's what the bronze bomber names come from. He became a bronze medalist, had a very long undefeated streak where he was knocking everybody out, became a titleist at heavyweight, a true world titleist at heavyweight, defended that world title several times, had a classic trilogy with Tyson Fury, made tons of money, and the whole time had one punch. The whole time it was just a straight right hand that carried him through all of this. And part of me wishes he would have took a loss earlier in his career to where it would have woke him up and like, oh, I got to learn other stuff. I got to learn how to use a left jab more efficiently, get a left hook. He has knocked out people with right uppercut, but it's been wild right uppercuts after they're already hurt. His main punch 95% of the time was a straight right hand. And for him to accomplish what he accomplished with just a straight right hand is amazing. Absolutely amazing what he was able to do. And I think that he has brought it as far as it could go because there's no top guys who he's going to be able to beat now. I don't see him beating Joshua. I don't see him beating Andrew Ruiz. I don't see him beating a Joe Joyce or anybody like that and of that ilk, of that type heavyweight guys, because he has one weapon. And not only does he only have one weapon, he doesn't know how to set up that one weapon. Right? If he knew how to set up that right hand, it would be lights out for a lot of people, but he just doesn't even know how to do that. So shout out to Joseph Parker just exposing the lack of boxing knowledge and boxing acumen for Deontay Wilder. And Deontay Wilder, shout out to you for getting as far as you did and doing what you did with that straight right hand. But I think it's time for Deontay Wilder to go ahead and retire, bro, because there's no top guy you can beat. And we don't want to see you fighting against the lower guys. It's not worth it at this point. So I think you should go ahead and ride off into the sunset. Joseph Parker, I think he should get a rematch against Anthony Joshua because that first fight was just the first fight they had was just terrible from a refereeing standpoint, from an action standpoint. They need to redo it just to give the fans something and also prove who's a better guy.
Man, this is such a great shout, and recency bias is definitely a thing, but I think this is the one that's deserving, even though I'm going to go over a little bit of a different route. This one was crazy, and I'm going to say this because obviously I am the resident MMA guy here. This very much was reminiscent to me as far as just a fighter's athletic ceiling, right, falling out beneath them. Not that I thought Wilder looked terrible necessarily, but when you're showing up and you're not able to bring to bear the one thing that keeps you relevant, it just becomes clear, like you said, the years of which you were able to get away with these things. So this was my Tony Ferguson award for boxing, as far as looking at someone's skills and being like, man, we don't get to see him do what he does anymore just because the physical aspects aren't so much wider as they were in his prime, that now at this later stage of his career, he can't really overcome those skill deficiencies that earlier on in his career, he would just wipe away with those shots. But always love to see Wilder fight. I don't care if he's fighting bums the rest of his life. I need to see another one of those Stavern moments where my guy in real life hit the DBZ after image. My boy hit the longest step to the side. You heard the shoo, and then he threw that uppercut. I need something like that out of him at a Day of Reckoning card. But I got to say, ayahuasca, I've taken the plunge. I've drank the root. Might not be the best route when you're a professional fighter or a professional athlete. I'm looking at you, Aaron Rodgers. But Julio, do you have anything to say about that underdog performance before you give out your award?
Actually, it's my award as well. The Joseph Parker is the same one I have as underdog award of the year. I'm actually a big Wilder fan. Wilder is probably my favorite heavyweight, I'll say. But I agree with you, Damian. Even as long as I've been a fan of his, I've always known he's not a good boxer. I've never been a fan of him because of his boxing ability. It's literally been because of how he's been able to do, like you said, stop everybody with just that one punch in his arsenal. And it's just been amazing to see because part of the reason why he's been able to win so many fights is because before Fury, everybody's known that if they get hit just one time, it's over. But I don't think his lack of boxing ability is the only reason why he lost this fight. I think it's a combination of that, obviously, but two, the fact that he only fought one round in the last 2 years, and that last one round was a whole year ago. And then that trilogy he had with Fury, he spent his entire career thinking he was unbeatable, thinking nobody can withstand his right hand. Now suddenly you have a man that's walking right through it and getting up, coming from the grave when you landed on him. So I think he lost a lot of confidence as well. And the lack of confidence added up with the inactivity he's in the ring again all of a sudden in one of the biggest fights of his life in Saudi Arabia. And I think he got a little gun shy because part of the issue was he wasn't throwing the right hand.
Yeah.
He wasn't really throwing anything in a lot of the moments of the fight, which was a little frustrating to see. And because of that, I do agree with Damian. I think it might be time for him to hang it up. Because a big part of what made him great was his overconfidence. And if he's not going to have any confidence to do anything, he's not beating anybody. And it's funny because the last time Chris and I had a conversation about Wilder, right after the trilogy, we were talking about how we don't think anybody other than Fury can beat him. And I thought that myself up until what I saw this past Saturday. Now it's like, man, I don't know what's left for him. If this is what we're going to see from him.
Yeah.
Dude, and who knows, maybe in 2 years, we're talking about the resurgent career of Joseph Parker and how this was the turning point in his career, because heavyweights age on a different curve, man. So
yeah, Parker's only 31.
Yeah, really, and it really does speak to what you said there, Julio, of just how things change, right? We're going to get into in a second, are looking forward to 2024, and hell, not as far as 2024, but looking into 2025, maybe the fighter of the year 2025 isn't really even on the radar right now. Like that is a very possible thing. Yeah. So the turnover in sports, but especially in combat sports, is what is so exciting about it. And once again, leaves you in a position where you could think about all these different outcomes. For my underdog performance of the year, I got to go hipster, right? I said this multiple times to whoever. I'm going the hipster route. My underdog pick for performance of the year is Emmanuel Navarrete against Oscar Valdez. A fight that he was a 2-1 underdog, where I felt, man, like this is going to be a close fight. But I didn't necessarily think he was going to go out there and win. And God damn it, the old dog came out there with some new tricks. I love me some Navarrete. Obviously, he went on to fight, I think it was Robesi in his next fight, and ended up losing that one. But you love to see a vet go out
that's
there.
Another one. The next fight he had, sorry to cut you off, that next fight he had against Robson Cosensal was a fight that could have been on the Are You Dead Ass segment. Because I thought Cosensal won that fight. I thought Cosensal won that fight for sure. Like, so yeah, Navarrete, that's a rematch that need to happen in 2024 is Cosensal versus Navarrete for sure.
For sure.
Great shout.
That was heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And getting back to that fight, it was just, I remember in the night, I was like, yeah, like it might be worth it to just throw something on the underdog just because. Like I was talking to my dad about that. I was like, this is going to be that close of a fight, but he didn't make it look close at all, right? Like by the end of that one, you was confident about who was going to win it. And sort of the story of the fight was, when is Valdez going to make a fight out of this? Like that. And when that's the story of the fight over and over again, speaks to the level of performance there. So that's my underdog performance of the year. All right. I'm not fucking up no longer. We're in 2024, goddammit. And we're going to move on with our predictions for male fighter of the year in 2024. I think there's so many different ways and angles that we can go with this. Honestly, most of the time, big name fighters get this award. So it's a little difficult to anticipate, right? What fights are you going to get to make this outcome? But a fun one nonetheless. I'm going to make Julio kick us off. Who do you think is going to be male fighter of the year next year?
I think there are a few guys that are in that potential discussion. But just to keep this, to keep some anticipation with what you guys might say, I'm just going to give my pick. And no bias here, but I'm going to go with my guy, Devin Haney, mainly because of the potential fights we have lined up for him right now. So right now he's in negotiations with Ryan. That'll be a big money fight for him. We know there's a potential of him unifying and fighting Teofimo, which will be a very big legacy fight for him. And it'll be very well, I won't say likely, but based on what we've been seeing and their back and forth between their teams, him fighting Abdul, which is we know as Tank. If he can get those 3 fights next year and win all 3 of those, unify in a new weight class and win all 3 of those fights, it'll be very hard to get fighter of the year for anybody else. So I'm gonna go with my guy Haney. I think he's gonna go ahead and win that.
Mm.
Damn.
That's a very good pick. Now that's a very good pick right there, especially if Haney gets the fights that he wants to get. The Ryan Garcia fight that looks like they're setting up now isn't one that's going to get you fight of the year, but it's one that's going to get you on the radar, right? If he beats Ryan Garcia in a big time pay per view, then it's like, okay, what's next? And then he gets to Teofimo, and maybe he has to go ahead and beat Raleigh. If he he go ahead and does that, he'll definitely be that guy because then he'll be undisputed at two different weight classes. And then you'll see him talk about moving up to 147 for 2025. And that's something I definitely want to see from Haney as well. I think he can move up in weight classes great because the way he looked against my guy Regis Prograis, he looked very strong at 140 and still had the quickness and all the things that made him great at 135. So I'm really like that pick of Devin Haney. For my pick, we talked about him earlier, Dimitri Bivol. I think Dimitri Bivol is going to be the fighter of the year in 2024. I could see him early on in the year fighting against somebody, maybe Anthony Yard, maybe a Joshua Batsi, someone like that that's on the upper echelon of the contenders at 175, and then getting that match against Arthur Beterbiev and becoming undisputed at 175. And I think those two fights will definitely put him in that conversation for fighter of the year.
Whew. Two very formidable names, two fighters that I'm really excited to see compete in 2024. But my pick is a very different direction, and it's going to require a lot of marionette work in the background for the right fights to fall in line. But give me Boots Ennis. I think he really broke out this year as far as being someone that the casuals need to look out for in this game. And I'm just such a big fan of his style. I feel like he is the new age of boxing. I feel like his ability to be such a showman, to give you what people look for when they look thinking about all-time great showman fighters. You get that on top of being a very great fighter as well. That's next level. So once again, I'm a big fan of Boots, and I can't wait to see what he looks to accomplish in 2024.
So
next
for
up,
Boots,
go ahead.
real quick, for Boots, if he can't get the winner of the Crawford Spence rematch, if we get that rematch, let's get Boots moved up to 154. Boots versus Tim Tszyu, 154 in 2024. Let's make that happen.
That would be amazing. You know what it is with Boots? Eddie Hearn said it himself. If he was under Eddie Hearns, he'd probably be much bigger than he is now. I hate the way that his career has been managed. I feel like if you have a talent like that, he should be much bigger than what he is. But he just hasn't got the right fights against the right names and hasn't been promoted in the right way. And that's why it's hard for him to get a lot of these big fights because similar to Morrell, he's a high risk, low reward fight for a lot of these top guys. You know, most people don't know who he is. And essentially you're losing to a nobody, even though us hardcore fans know he's not a nobody. He's a very major threat, but to the casuals, he's a nobody. So yeah, I'm hoping this, this whole new PBC thing and this new network helps fighters like him and gets him promoted the right way so that we can get those fights from him. And I agree with Chris. If things align properly, he can definitely be a fighter of the year.
Yeah, man, it's gonna take a miracle stroke, but hey, what we've seen out of boxing, like I said multiple times at this point in 2023, if that continues to carry over, goddamn it, we're gonna be in for a great year in 2024. Our final award of the day, what we're looking forward to, our 2024 Woman Fighter of the Year. I'm gonna kick us off because once again, I'm so excited to talk about this woman. Give me Amanda Serrano, even though she was some people's fighter of the year this year. I think obviously the hype of that trilogy is going to be taking up the biggest space in women's boxing. But I think the rematch between Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor is the fight that everyone really wanted. Nobody really wanted that Chantel Cameron fight. Let's be real. It was a daring to be great moment. And eventually she did prove she was on that level. But I think the ultimate real rematch, the real fight that people want to see is Amanda Serrano getting that second crack against Katie Taylor after how close the first fight was. Very similar, if you ask me, to the Devin Haney-Lomachenko fight, as far as being such a closely contested back and forth fight that even though the majority of people agree that one person won, you'll want to see it anyway because it was that close. So I would love to see that happen next year. But even if it doesn't happen, I just think the way she's been managed in her career, everyone talks shit about Jake Paul and how he is the scourge of boxing. I think ultimately, if there's one thing and one thing alone that has gotten him in my good graces, it's how he's worked in tandem with Amanda Serrano and making her a draw, making her someone that people are excited to watch and someone that has sort of their own stake in boxing in the women's game that nobody else really has. Nobody else is out here innovating women's boxing, right? So shout out to the MVP team, even though I'm not a fan of Jake Paul and his antics. I think the business side and what he's been able to accomplish has been so shrewd and really thoughtful as far as his missions in the boxing game. So can't knock the hustle. The dude has become a draw, but that, if you ask me, and moving forward, helping other fighters in similar ways is going to be the legacy that Jake Paul leaves behind in not just boxing, but in MMA as well. So enough fucking Jake Paul talk. Give me Amanda Serrano next year, injected into my veins. I need to see all kind of Jordan custom boxing shoes. Just one of the all-time greats that doesn't get enough credit and has finally sort of turned that corner and is now getting the flower she deserves.
Oh, for sure. Nah, she's definitely getting the flower she deserves now. I love how she's innovating in women's boxing. And the fight that I want to see, truly want to see in women's boxing in 2024 is Amanda Serrano versus Alicia Baumgartner. I think that Alicia Baumgartner, I know you might not want to hear this, I think she wins that fight against Amanda Serrano. And that's why I'm going with Alicia Baumgartner to be my fighter of the year. And, there's a selfish part of me that likes to look at her in the ring and outside of the ring. So Alicia Baumgartner, part of me just selfishly rooting for her to be fighter of the year so I get to see her a bit more. But I think that, her personality is coming across now. And, the fact that she's not scared of anybody, the fact that she's challenging Clarissa Shields, which I don't think is going to happen. The weight difference is way too much between those two fighters. But I think that Alicia Baumgartner putting her name out there, saying that she's not scared of anybody, can get her maybe Katie Taylor or maybe a Chantel Cameron or Amanda Serrano realistically, which will put her in that fight of the year conversation. So give me Alicia Baumgartner for fight of the year.
Yeah, and I'm glad you both had those picks because those are the two that it came down to for me. But I'm also going with Alicia, only because of the possibility of her possibly fighting Amanda and then later fighting Clarissa. If those two fights can happen, and she can win both of those, I think it's undisputed that she's fighter of the year. Granted, I don't know if I agree that she would beat Amanda. She is bigger, so she would definitely have the advantage there. But and then with Clarissa, it's also unlikely with such a big weight difference. But Clarissa said it. Let's start our journeys to meet at the halfway point. So if they can make it happen, maybe if I'm Alicia, probably go for that Amanda fight first earlier in the year, and then work on gaining the weight for Clarissa near the end of the year. If she can do that, I also have her as my prediction for Women's Fighter of the Year.
Ooh, I love it. I love that we're on two sides of the same coin, so to speak. Just really excited that there's names outside of the marquee champions, right? That we're excited to watch fight in 2024 in the women's side of things. I've just been such a fan on how they were innovators at first, but now there's just so many different real up and coming stars in the women's divisions that people really need to open their eyes to. Because I know so many people that are still kind of archaic when it comes to that side of the game. And there's just a ton of fucking good shit. Even though at the top end, as in most weight classes, right, at the lower end, things can be a little rough. But at the top end, some of those fights I would rather watch than some marquee fights that we're getting. So that speaks to the level of top end women's boxing. But damn, this has been one hell of a ride, you guys. I just wanted to say again, thanks for making the way on, making the show, and just having fun with it, right? Because ultimately, after some point, this just felt like a one of us. one of us moment. We were just out here geeking out, and then every time everyone had another point, we're just here smiling because, yeah, once again, there's been so many things to smile about in this year 2023, and so many things to look forward to in boxing in 2024. And something I look forward to is getting both of you guys back on the show as well as a lot of these things unfold, so we can look forward to more fights as well. So before we get out of here again, I just like each of you to remind the people where they can find your work, so they can look forward to you musing on fights looking forward. So why don't you let the people know again, Damian, where they can find you?
So you can find me on social media at The Real Deal WDA. That's The Real Deal, W as in whiskey, D as in Delta, A as in alpha, on all social media platforms. And that's short for my podcast, The Real Deal with Damian Adams, which will have a big year in 2024. Kind of slipped off a bit in the consistency towards the end of 2023 here with the work I was doing with Burn City Sports. So my New Year's resolution that I will stick to is to have the show be more consistent each and every week. Definitely got to have my man Chris on because both his teams, the Ravens and Thunder, are balling out right now. So I got to have him on to talk about that. And of course, boxing and UFC as well. So I definitely will be sending that invite very, very soon. Got my new friend here, Julio. Got to get him on, talk some boxing for sure. Get him on later on in the year as well. So make sure you go ahead and subscribe to The Real Deal with Damian Adams podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And check me out on social media at The Real Deal WDA.
Just the goddamn pros pro, right? You close your eyes and I'm like, man, just take me home, Damian, because I got a feeling you know where it is. But go ahead, Julio. What are you going to say?
And myself, again, Julio, you can find me on social media at Droll_shorts, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Facebook, Julio Maldonado. I don't have a podcast like Damian yet, but when I do, that's where you'll hear about it. But definitely looking forward to hopping on more episodes of the Sidelines, guys, and Damian, your show as well. It's not too many people I can really talk boxing with that know what they're talking about. So this was really fun.
For sure.
Hell yeah. I couldn't agree more, man. You guys made this super special. And once again, looking forward to working you guys more throughout the year. And you could find that awesome stuff that'll be coming in 2024 at OTS Media Co. on all social media platforms, OTS Media on YouTube. And you could also find me if you're interested in those things, and MMA talk and NFL talk and NBA. I do it all, baby. The range is unlimited on the Sideline, guys. Make sure you follow me at Negron MMA on Twitter and TikTok, as well as Chris Negron _ on Instagram. But God damn it, I've run out of time. I'm sure you guys want more, but you got to wait for the next one. And until then, just remember, ladies and gentlemen, don't fuck around and get that box cut unless you're able to handle the responsibilities, Tony Weeks. We'll catch you next week. Peace.